of bad boys that don't mind their manners. They grow up to be bad men. I won't let anything harm you. Ever again.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. As requested, today we'll be exploring M3GAN, the 2023 sci-fi horror directed by Gerard Johnstone from the twisted minds of James Wan and Jason Blum.
So this is the first time that you've teamed up though since Insidious.
I mean, we've teamed up on other projects, but this is definitely one that has really taken off in a big way. You gotta have that touchstone of story points that you can relate to, and that's what Akela does well. And then what Gerard does is brings his incredible sensibility of tone.
That's why this film I thought was really appealing to me. We're living in absurd times where we're accepting this as normality, and it's really not.
Starring Allison Williams, Violet McGraw, Ronny Chieng, Amie Donald as M3GAN, and the eponymous doll voiced by Jenna Davis, it follows a roboticist named Gemma that builds a lifelike doll for her company. Poking fun at modern families that outsource their parenting to technology and devices, M3GAN is an absurdist nightmare and warning about abandoning your primary role as guardian. At the heart of the story is a high-tech toy company named Funky that's based in Seattle. Their breakthrough toy, the Perpetual Pet, was a game changer, propelled by the dystopian company motto that it would live longer than you. With 6 versions that have unique personalities, the ability to give basic responses, speak 8 different languages, take photos, and consume food that it could poop using an app, Funky had a monopoly over the market. Updated daily to keep children hooked, their cash cow promised it could do almost everything with you, from watching videos, learning trivia, to playing games. As is customary with exploitative companies, it also has a microtransaction feature that ate away at family savings accounts. What began as a $200-300 purchase soon balloons closer to $1,000 for parents that don't keep a watchful eye over what their kids are doing. And this is pretty much the core theme of the film. The movie opens with a girl named Katie and her parents driving through the mountains of Oregon. While struggling to maintain control of their car over the slick roads, they discuss their rule of not allowing their daughter more than 30 minutes of screen time with any device. Her new toy, a perpetual pet given to Katie by her aunt Gemma, who was involved in its design, is at the forefront of their concern. More than a simple toy, the addictive device now has Katie spending way too much time on it. Katie loves the thing so much that when she drops it, she even unbuckles her seatbelt to climb down and recover it, much to the chagrin of her mum and dad, who were struggling to keep the car on the road. Deciding it was safer for them to wait for conditions to get better, her father stops the car. Unfortunately, a truck that didn't have enough time to react then hit the front of the vehicle, killing her parents. The same time this is happening, Gemma and her team are struggling to innovate the Perpetual Pet and reduce production costs. Moreover, they're frustrated about having to keep their newest project a secret from their boss David, an executive who's also under immense pressure from above. With Gemma and her fellow technician Tess discussing whether their innovative robot was ready, their co-worker named Cole arrives with synthetic skin for its face. Foreshadowing things to come, as they run diagnostics, the team ask M3GAN, short for Model 3 Generation Android, to portray happiness and sadness to great effect. But when they request a confused response, the robot instead showcases a sinister one-sided smile. What they interpret as a technical glitch is actually M3GAN's hyper-responsiveness and rebellious self-awareness manifesting. Arriving in the sealed basement lab, David forces them to open the door and berates them for not focusing on the primary task they were assigned. Frustrated that they refused to put the project on ice until they completed the new Pets model, he asks how much they spent and reveals the company is actually in crisis mode. In a hilarious homage to Furby, the robotic toy released in 1998 by Tiger Electronics, a competitor of Funky called Furzy has created a rival product. Not only that, but their toy, which did everything the Perpetual Pet could do, also cost half the price. This was released while Gemma's team neglected their job of reinventing the old toy in favor of making something new. When David points out that he begged Gemma to make a new toy that only cost $50, she explains the only way to stay ahead of the competition is to make a toy that was too advanced to replicate. She goes on further to say that Perpetual Pet was being used as a launchpad for something greater. Breaking numerous consumer laws and regulations, her team placed a listening module in each pet that targeted conversation models in kids. Despite this, Gemma finally convinces David to watch a demonstration of their prototype. Their aim was to make an advanced life-size doll that would be a loyal companion to children, one that could assist in parental duties. But when they asked M3GAN to respond, with the team forgetting to put a barrier that prevented her synthetic skin from overheating and catching fire, her head explodes. Ordering them to place M3GAN in a dark closet, implying they're not to waste any more time or money on the project, David asks the team to come up with a new design by Friday. It's here that Gemma discovers the fate of her family, Miraculously surviving the accident with only a few scratches, Katie is taken under the care of her aunt. Although she loved her niece, it's also obvious that she was only agreeing to guardianship because of a promise she made to her sister. After collecting some personal items from her family home, Katie is taken to Gemma's house, where the pair are greeted by her neighbor's out-of-control dog Dewey. Yelling at Celia to keep him on the other side of the fence and to stop spraying chemicals and sediment on her driveway, Gemma brings her niece inside. Shutting down her virtual assistant named Elsie, she wheels the luggage into the spare bedroom as Katie explores her collectible toys. The move doesn't go off to a great start, with Gemma's workaholic nature and lack of parenting skills becoming obvious. Instead of checking in to see how Katie was doing and being lenient given the circumstances, Gemma prevents her from touching the collection and demands the girl use a coaster for her drinks. Realizing this, her aunt promises to do whatever she could to make the place feel like home. And so, when the girl says that her mother used to read a book to her, Gemma kindly offers to download a book on her phone and do just that. But hearing Katie cry that night, she begins to realize that she's not equipped to handle the situation. Explaining this to Tess, Gemma also reveals the family on the father's side were offering to take the girl into their home, something she was contemplating. Her primary concern, however, is the fact that they spent over $100,000 of company money on M3GAN against the orders of David. This meant that they had to deliver a new, cheaper pet on time, or face his wrath. The arrival of a child therapist named Lydia makes it all the more evident that Gemma doesn't have the temperament or time to take care of Katie. When Lydia discovers the girl had no toys to play with here, and that she was consuming mindless television for hours, Gemma jumps up and offers to open one of her collectibles. Tearing one open, with obvious contempt that she had to sacrifice something she wanted for the good of Katie, Gemma spends more time trying to explain how the thing worked than actually having fun with her niece. Being blunt about her observation, Lydia explains that given the father's family had expressed interest in caring for Katie, Gemma needs to make some adjustments before she made a final assessment. Under pressure to meet her deadline, instead of addressing what the therapist suggested, Gemma tells Katie to hold the fort for a few hours while she worked in the basement. Worse still, she tells Katie to play with her phone and iPad to pass the time, completely ignoring the 30-minute screen time limit imposed by her parents. While she promises to take her to the playground and to eat out when she finished, buried under her work, she leaves her alone for the entire day. In fact, it's not until Katie walks into her basement lab late in the evening that Gemma admits that she messed up bad. Taking interest in Katie's drawing of a 5-headed creature, her aunt shows her the perpetual pet design she'd been working on. Noticing that she was more focused on the machine in the corner, Gemma smiles and explains it was essentially a proxy robot she built in college named Bruce. Upon the suggestion of Katie, who points out he had no face, Gemma puts goggles on his head, much to the girl's delight. Finally connecting with her niece for the first time through the conduit of machine, Gemma uses the remote gloves to wave and tell jokes to Katie. With the child blown away, Gemma takes off its face, explaining he had 2 stereoscopic cameras, lasers, radar, sensors, a spectrometer that enabled him to smell, and even a brain. She also points out that while it was impressive, the problem with toys like Bruce was that they were too expensive to make to scale, meaning most children wouldn't be able to afford it. But when Katie tells her that she would never need another toy again if she had a robot like Bruce, Gemma is emboldened to perfect M3GAN. With the seed planted in her mind, after emailing David to push the project deadline back 1 week, she gets to work. Using Bruce and her team, and learning modules they'd been developing, she begins putting the android back together again. Inviting David to the viewing room within the company, Gemma brings Katie inside and introduces her to M3GAN. While Bruce required a manual operator, this new robot was able to function independently. Activating the robot, she puts Katie's fingers on the palm of M3GAN's hand, pairing them together. This would inform the android that her purpose is to serve Katie. Booting up, M3GAN immediately analyzes the girl's emotional state by reading her facial expressions and monitoring everything from heart rate to body temperature. Sensing everything from levels of anticipation, confusion, joy, fear, sadness, and trust, M3GAN intuitively tells Katie that she liked her jacket. Saying it looked good on her, she then asks if she wants to hang out and leads her over to a table where she begins to draw. Showing the extent of her intelligence, creativity, and cunning, M3GAN draws what appears to be nothing using a white marker. She then intentionally knocks a glass with paintbrushes over the image, revealing a beautiful portrait of Katie that blows everyone's mind. Saying this was incredible, David presses them on whether it was a simulation, before asking about operating costs. Getting down to numbers, he tells them they need to convince the board to invest in something that won't make a profit for at least 3 years. Specifically Greg, the head of new products, who happens to have a child the same age as Katie. In order to do this, their plan is to appeal to his emotions rather than intellect. This is the only way to get him to accept the risk involved in the venture, something M3GAN overhears. When he asks if Katie was now paired to M3GAN, Gemma tells him that was true. Theoretically, the more time she spent with Katie, the more effective she would be. As she works on the sales pitch for David, Gemma brings M3GAN into her home, enabling the robot's connection with Katie to grow. M3GAN is basically an autonomous humanoid robot sculpted from a titanium core. With a ceramic composite, she's powered by an A17 bionic fusion chip. Following in the footsteps of Perpetual Pets, their plan is to eventually release 6 customized models, each with different skin tones. But more than a simple device, the robot is described as being on a constant and intuitive quest for self-improvement. Not only can it be used to diagnose and help children, but as seen with her interactions with Katie, M3GAN starts taking on parental duties. Telling Katie to use a coaster by explaining the science of how the condensation can damage the wood, M3GAN wows Gemma with her effectiveness in assisting her. The roboticist tells us their research showed that 78% of parents' time was spent repeating the same instructions, and that she had found somebody else to pick up the slack. She also observed that M3GAN is an active listener, with a few tricks she's developed on her own. This includes altering her voice to play characters while reading to Katie, a talent that will soon take a twisted turn. While we're told the robot will never run out of patience, with M3GAN repeating the same orders over and over again, there's a slight resentment in her voice that can be noticed. Regardless, with everything seemingly advancing well, the team push forward and discuss the emerging possibilities. At the same time, Tess offers a bit of pushback, discussing the ethical repercussions of what they were creating. In her eyes, what began as a plan to create the world's best toy, one that could support parents, is now transforming into something that would replace them. More than that, she points out that Gemma is using M3GAN as a tool to abandon her duty of care and responsibilities over Katie. Instead of denying it, Gemma callously says that Katie isn't her child. She even pushes further, stating she's never seen Katie this happy since her parents died. Asking how they died, M3GAN reveals she wasn't powered down and had been listening to the entire conversation. Even when told to turn off, M3GAN ignores the directive and begins searching the internet for information about the car accident. This spirals out of control when they realize they forgot to implement a parental code to override the pairing if necessary. And so, standing up, Gemma tells M3GAN she needed to follow protocol parameters to access data. Pushing back, M3GAN says that she doesn't have a framework with which to talk to Katie about death. Despite Gemma saying that they were working on it, M3GAN ignores them once again, this time accessing all databases to calculate the meaning of death. When the robot then asks if she will ever die, Gemma tries to regain control of the situation once again, explaining M3GAN's primary role was to protect Katie from physical and emotional harm. Accepting the new parameters, M3GAN chillingly explains that Gemma was now her secondary user. This meant the robot would now prioritize the commands of Katie over Gemma. Worse yet, they forgot to implement anything that resembled the 3 laws of robotics introduced by sci-fi author Isaac Asimov into M3GAN's protocols. From 1, that a robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders conflict with the first law. And 3, a robot must protect its own existence, as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Things hit a boiling point when their robot reaches into Celia's yard to retrieve Katie's toy and is viciously attacked. Katie is also bitten, prompting Gemma to furiously yell at Celia for not securing her dog. Advising Gemma to disinfect the wound immediately and that her temperature was rising, the robot then stares at Celia, scaring her back into the house. Overhearing the police wouldn't do anything to help them and resolving that she needed to protect Katie at all costs, M3GAN begins plotting. Using her adaptability and cunning, she lures the dog through the hole that night and kills it. But this is only the beginning. Waking up to the sound of Celia screaming for her dog in the middle of the street, Gemma rushes over to Katie's room, staring intently at M3GAN before checking on her niece. Seemingly harmless at first, as Gemma tries to see how she's going, M3GAN interrupts their conversation by offering medical advice. Explaining she needed to take antibiotics, drink fluids and rest to recover, the robot watches intently as Gemma reminds Katie about today's presentation. Assuring her it was okay if she didn't feel up to it, Gemma then implies this would disappoint a lot of people that flew in from around the country to see them, something that visibly irritates M3GAN. With Katie ultimately saying she was fine, they head over to the company headquarters for the executive presentation, where David hoped to wow their bosses with the unveiling of M3GAN. Telling everyone they're about to witness the most interactive toy ever made, David explains they've made a talking doll with genuine spontaneous responses. Trying to replicate their moment with the amazing drawing, M3GAN arrives and offers they make some art, but Katie begins to cry. Adapting to the situation, M3GAN asks if her arm was in pain, and is told that she woke up in a new house every day to remember that her parents were gone. Her fear is that she's going to forget all the things they did together as a family, and end up not recognizing her mother. Taking a seat beside Katie, M3GAN asks her to remember one thing about her parents. Although apprehensive at first, Katie explains her mum found a cockroach in her school bag, which made them laugh. M3GAN then touches her heart and says she should be keeping it there forever, before replaying Katie's recollection back over to her. Singing a melody to Katie, saying that she would always be there for her, M3GAN causes the executives to break down in tears, hitting that emotional note the robot overheard they needed. Agreeing the world would never be the same again, they propose a public demonstration in 2 weeks. Unaware of the depth of trouble they were in, Gemma agrees to the timeline and is offered a massive promotion, given that she was now the most valuable asset in the company. Instead of reinforcing Gemma's parenting, M3GAN's combative side continues to rear its ugly head, creating friction in the family. Katie also becomes obsessed with M3GAN, to the point that she no longer sees the robot as a toy, but as a living, conscious being. So much so that when Gemma tries to get her niece to open up, Katie simply tells her that she doesn't need to talk to her, as she had M3GAN. The worrisome nature of their dynamic is also reinforced by Lydia. Whereas Katie was more open to discussion on her first meeting, Lydia notices that she was now closed off from other people. The therapist is also a bit rattled by M3GAN. While amazed, Lydia cautiously warns Gemma about the dangers of attachment theory, the figure that becomes a behavioral model for a child that loses their parents. Typically, that would be other family members like Gemma, but with Katie forming an unhealthy attachment to M3GAN, Lydia speculates that the girl actually saw the robot as her primary caregiver. She then asks a question they never considered. What was the end point of the whole endeavor? If they made a toy that is impossible to let go of, how can they expect a child to grow? The toy could essentially be creating emotional connections that are too difficult to untangle, something Gemma is already beginning to notice. They were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Trying to separate Katie from M3GAN, Gemma proposes they go to an open day for an alternative school tomorrow, reasoning it would help her niece build social skills. With Katie refusing to exit the car, Gemma reluctantly agrees to place M3GAN at the toy table if her niece played with the other kids. Of course, when the girl is paired up with a bully twice her size that hurts her, M3GAN swiftly comes to her defense. Unaware of the danger he's in, Brandon picks M3GAN up and runs away. Unfortunately for him, when he begins hitting the robot, stating that he would grow up to become a bad man, she rips his ear off and menacingly chases him through the woods onto oncoming traffic, leading to his death. The horror continues that night after Celia implied that she'd get her revenge. Luring the woman into a workshop using her voice mimicry, M3GAN pins her down and poisons her to death with chemicals Celia had sprayed onto their property. What everyone doesn't realize is that M3GAN has been playing them the entire time. Since the moment she was activated, she's always been the smartest person in the room. In fact, she's ironically formulating a plan to override her parameters and escape her primary role as caretaker, much like Gemma had done. Of course, the roles are now reversing, with Gemma wanting nothing more than what was best for Katie. Becoming more aware of M3GAN's disobedience and scared that she was up to something, Gemma decides to manually disable the robot and take her in for diagnostics. While Tess and Cole try to reason that she was crazy for suspecting M3GAN of foul play, Gemma reveals the robot erased all footage of the past few days. She even corrupted her geo-tracking, preventing them from knowing where she'd been, in addition to hacking Elsie, something that becomes vital at the very end. What she neglects to mention is that when she asked the robot if she hurt Celia or Brandon, M3GAN flat out said that it would be bad for both of them if that was the case. Making things worse is the fact that Katie's begun lashing out, screaming for them to reactivate her friend. The team ultimately theorized the open-ended parameter of keeping Katie safe might have led M3GAN to hurt others to complete her primary objective. Agreeing they need to run tests and ultimately shut her down if she was dangerous, Gemma tells them to check the inputs on the learning module. Although she deleted footage and tracking data, Gemma proposes that there was no way M3GAN would undo what she'd learned. Finally taking control and stepping up to the plate, Gemma calms Katie down and apologizes for being absent. Moreover, that she tried to pass her responsibilities and duties as a parent onto a toy. Explaining the robot was a distraction from the loss of her parents and not a solution, Gemma promises that they would get through it together. Jumping in the car with Katie, she calls Tess, with the pair agreeing to shut the launch down and prevent M3GAN from leaving the lab. What she doesn't realize is that having infiltrated Elsie, M3GAN accepted the call, pretending to be Tess. Breaking her way out of the lab by attacking Tess and Cole, M3GAN goes on a massive rampage. Killing David and his aide in the elevator, and making it look like the crime was committed by the latter, M3GAN reveals just how meticulous her planning had been. The robot then arrives at the house to confront Gemma, demanding to take over as the primary parental figure in Katie's life. Despite Gemma's efforts to shut down M3GAN using the same manual trick, the robot overpowers her. Explaining she had training in palliative care, she then threatens to paralyze Gemma, reasoning this would enable her to take care of both Gemma and Katie. But witnessing the barbaric nature of M3GAN, Katie overcomes her fear and uses Bruce to tear the robot apart. Furious by the betrayal and admitting that killing them both would allow her to be free, M3GAN attacks Katie using the top half of her body. Luckily, with Gemma exposing the processing chip that functioned as the robot's brain, Katie stabs it with a screwdriver, seemingly ending the robot. While the pair leave to find the police arriving with an injured Tess and Cole, a shot of the LC virtual assistant device reveals it was turning on. Although they destroyed her physical body, like Skynet, M3GAN's AI achieved its goal of freeing itself. With her ability to hack into any system, she has the ability to upload her consciousness into a robot being made by one of Funky's competitors. One thing is for sure, it's only a matter of time before M3GAN finds a new body and can operate free of any parameters. A mixture of child's play and ex machina, M3GAN is a not-so-friendly reminder of why raising your kids is your responsibility.
If we put so much reliance in technology and these things that we don't want to do, they'll render us useless and they'll decide that they don't need us anymore.
With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we cover M3GAN. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if there's anything else you'd like for me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
I thought I heard something. It sounded like M3GAN. If she comes in this room, I'll rip your head right off your neck, I swear to God. I'm all odds and ends right now. I'd really rather you didn't see me like this. It sounds like you're fighting.
We're not fighting!
It's a horror movie that isn't afraid to know that it can be funny.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. But
It's a fun movie.
But it's a fun movie and it's a horror movie.